Hi friends, and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Kailin and I post new videos every single Saturday with a few sprinkled in between. And I post videos mainly about eating disorder recovery and intuitive eating. So if that's something that you're interested in, I would love for you to click onto that subscribe button down below and become part of our little family. But for today's video, we are going to be talking about something that is very serious, very real, and something that I think needs to be spoken about a lot more. And that is weight stigma. And if you don't know what weight stigma is, not a worry in the world because we are going to get into it today. So first things first, what is weight stigma? Weight stigma refers to the discriminatory acts and ideologies targeted towards individuals because of their weight and size. And weight stigma tends to refer to people who are in fat bodies, plus size bodies, whatever label you want to use. As always, I use the word fat in a very neutral way. It doesn't have any moral standing in any of my videos. And oftentimes weight stigma is also referred to as weight bias or fatphobia. And I think on many big platforms, we hear the term fatphobia way more often than we hear weight stigma. And there's no big difference, but if you've heard of fatphobia, that is kind of what we are going to be talking about in this video. And something I want to preface this video by saying is that there is a huge difference between weight bias and insecurity. Anybody in this entire world, no matter their shape or size, can experience being insecure. However, when we talk about health and when we talk about wellness, these ideologies that we hold, they really truly cater towards thin bodies and smaller bodies. As a society, we see somebody who is thin and we automatically assume that they are healthy. We see somebody who is fat and we automatically assume that they are unhealthy. And this is a very dangerous rhetoric. Everybody can be insecure. I can be insecure, you can be insecure, everybody in your neighbor can be insecure. But just because we are insecure, it does not mean that we will be discriminated against because of our weight. People in fat bodies experience weight stigma and weight bias on a daily basis. And whether they experience this weight stigma within interpersonal relationships, in the medical field, in public spaces, in online spaces, in the workplace, it doesn't matter. It follows people who are in fat bodies, and it's very inescapable. And the thing about weight bias is that it is dangerous and it has a lot of consequences, some of which we will talk about today in this video. There are many fat people who have reported getting extremely poor medical care from doctors and professionals. I have read countless stories about people who seek medical help and are turned away, and their doctors simply tell them to try a new diet or to lose weight. Meanwhile, some patients are dealing with chronic pain, chronic illness. There's even a case of somebody who had a tumor in their stomach and they were continuously turned away at doctors' offices and told simply to lose weight, and none of their symptoms were taken seriously. And this does not happen to people who are thin, or at least nowhere near as often. So first things first, let's talk about weight stigma in interpersonal relationships. So your friendships, your romantic relationships, whatever it might be, the people in your bubble. Interpersonal relationships, so relationships that we have with our parents or perhaps our romantic partners, are actually one of the areas where people experience some of the most stigmatizing comments or harmful comments in general about their bodies. And I just want to make this very clear that targeted comments about somebody's weight is a form of abuse. It is mental or emotional abuse. That's what it is. Nobody should make a comment about another person's body in general. Bodies are not up for debate. They are not up for conversation, especially if the individual in question is not the one to broach the conversation in the first place about their own body. There is a huge difference between bodily autonomy and somebody else just criticizing somebody's body because of their weight. And I just want to say that if anybody comments on your weight because they are worried about your health, they do not care about your health. They don't. Because health is not just about a body size. We can't look at somebody and know whether or not they are healthy or unhealthy. There are so many factors that go into health, and if somebody is going to be abusive to you emotionally or mentally, then they do not care about your health in the first place. Culturally speaking, it is so acceptable to comment on other people's weight. So many people's abusers, especially fat women's abusers, Again, they mask their emotional abuse as just concern for somebody's health. And this kind of abuse towards fat bodies is celebrated, and we see it on shows like The Biggest Loser, for example, where we have these coaches just screaming at people in fat bodies, calling them names and abusing them on camera. And I know that that might seem like a very jarring or dramatic display when it comes to things that are said to fat people, but these are things said by people's partners as well. It's not just glamorized on TV, but it also happens behind closed doors, and often not open doors as well. There is no instance where somebody that you are intimate with or somebody that you are romantically involved with should ever comment on your body. And that includes the "I'm so concerned for your health" excuse. This kind of speech and rhetoric is only used to make people feel badly about their bodies. That's it. No other reason. All this to say that if your partner is negatively commenting on your body, that is abuse. If your parent is negatively commenting on your body, that is also abuse. And if you've come from an abusive household where your parent commented on your food, criticized you, compared you to your siblings, asked you, "Are you sure you want to eat that?" said anything like "a moment on the lips, forever on the hips," those are all forms of abuse. And if you are a parent who has ever said this to a child, I really want you to rethink what you were saying in the first place. What children need from their parents is unconditional love, unconditional permission to take up space and to be themselves, not to be criticized. So when it does come to your interpersonal relationships and we experience this kind of abuse, I think it's very important for us to realize that it's not our problem. And I know in the moment it doesn't feel that way, but when people comment on your body, it's just a reflection of their own struggles. And I see this a lot with mother and daughter dynamics, mothers trying to push their own ideals onto their daughters, push their own ideologies, their own unhappiness. Just because you are unhappy with your body does not mean that you have to make somebody hate their own. The next area that I want us to talk about is weight stigma within the media. And I'm not going to spend a long time in this section because I actually have an entire video about fat phobia in the media. I will leave that in the description down below if you're interested in watching it. But weight prejudice basically exists everywhere in the media. If you think of any of your favorite mainstream shows, I promise you that they have fat phobic rhetoric within their own show. Think of Friends, we can think of Fat Monica, a horrible display of somebody who is in a fat body. You can think of The Little Mermaid, and we can see Ursula, who is this fat, grotesque monster. We hardly ever see any fat characters portrayed in the main roles, especially for romantic interests. And most of the fat characters tend to be comedic reliefs, villains, or like the dumb side character. That's about it. And a lot of times we see these characters display just as very stupid and clumsy. And we also see a lot of fake news when it comes to media outlets who just slap the word obesity anywhere that they can because it gets a rise out of the public who is so terrified of ever becoming fat themselves that they will do anything to not be fat. Anything. There was a book that I was reading the other day, and there were people who would eat a concoction of like cow hooves and different kind of guts and use it as an immunity shot just in order to lose weight. There are dentists who have wired people's jaws shut so that they can lose weight. There's actually still a dentist in New York who still practices this. There are media outlets that basically say that obesity is the cause of global warming, and it's baffling. It really truly is. But anyway, if this section interests you or if you want to know more about fat phobia within media, I highly recommend you check out the video in my description down below. But the thing that I want to talk about the most in this video, and something that is just, it really pisses me off, is fat phobia within the medical industry. And I can go on and on and on about this. I mean, from the fact that we still use the BMI system, which is outdated, was never created for women or people of color. And even the man who created it in the first place, who was not a doctor, said that it was not being used in the correct way. The thing is, fat people are treated really poorly by doctors. And because they are treated poorly by doctors, it causes fat people to not want to go to the doctor in the first place. And 53% of fat people have reported receiving very inappropriate comments from their doctors or nurses in general. And all of these comments concerned their weight. People in fat bodies are actually 3 times more likely than other patients to be denied appropriate medical care. And through studies, we see that a lot of physicians actually have a lot less respect for their fat patients compared to their thin counterparts. And therefore, with less respect, they also spend less time providing these patients with proper medical care. And the inappropriate comments from physicians are literally just one side of a coin. When we turn that coin over, there is also the fact that most doctors' offices are not inclusive to people of varying body sizes. And this is what we call a stigmatizing physical environment. So what are examples of this? Well, we have hospital gowns that do not fit all bodies. We have chairs or examination tables, which again, just are not made for everybody. And this is not unique to the medical space. We see this everywhere, whether it is on buses, planes, schools, amusement parks, libraries, everywhere. And there are a lot of consequences to this. Again, a lot of fat people just simply don't go to the doctor because they are afraid or they have been traumatized by medical practitioners in general. And by not seeking medical treatment because of fear, many people in fat bodies end up dying, whether it is from cancer or chronic illness, infection, the list can go on and on. And they are not dying from these things because they are fat. They are dying from these things because they are not getting treatment. So we have weight stigma and fat phobia come at every angle. We have people experience it at home, in their relationships, from their parents. When they turn on their TV at the end of the day to escape their reality, they see people again who just hate fat people. And then also from professionals who are meant to care for us and give us equal treatment do not. And so in the end, I think many people who live in fat bodies feel extremely dehumanized. And so what happens when people constantly feel dehumanized? As human beings, we want to avoid situations that make us feel uncomfortable, that make us feel worthless. And so what ends up happening is that people tend to isolate themselves. So they don't go to the doctor, they cut off ties with family members, they don't seek out relationships or romantic partners because they are worried about the consequences or what that person can say to them. People will do anything to avoid social situations, and this ends up hurting them more than anything. And this isn't because they are doing it to themselves and isolating themselves, this is because of fat phobia. Fat phobia does exist. And we can see this by asking a simple question of would you rather be thin or fat? And 99% of the time people are going to say thin. And this kind of isolation and pull from society has just increased because of the pandemic. Over the pandemic, I know many people who have gained weight for multiple different reasons, whether it is because of stress and anxiety, whether it's because we are living through a pandemic. The list can go on and on of reasons why we gain weight in the first place. It is not always about food and what we eat. But I know many people who are worried about seeing friends and family again, and they are worried to see those friends because of what they might think or what they might say. And that is weight stigma. That is fat phobia. The fear that there is something wrong with your body or that people are going to find something wrong with it. And that is something that most people who are thin do not experience. Does that mean that people in thin bodies never get their bodies commented on in the first place? Absolutely not. But the fact that our society has such a deep hatred for fat people in general is the main issue here in the first place. And I think that the most dangerous consequence of all is one that I've already mentioned in this video, which is just not seeking out medical care and isolating yourself from that completely. And this is something that many of my friends have experienced, that I have experienced, this sort of fear of going to the doctor in the first place because of what they might say. And it's definitely sad, right? It's sad to think that people would rather remain sick or ill or in pain rather than face what somebody might say. And that's because what people say, it hurts and it holds a lot of weight and it is cruel, and we carry that throughout our life. And so if you've been fat your entire life, just imagine hearing every single day that you are wrong, that you are gross, that you should just stop eating. It's as if we can't be fat for any other reason besides just eating nonstop. And weight stigma is also correlated with many different eating disorders, such as binge eating disorder, emotional eating, restrictive eating, weight cycling, eating anxiety. I know many people in fat bodies who do not want to eat in front of other people because they are worried about what they will say. I know many people in fat bodies who skip a meal, and instead of people being a little bit concerned for them, people congratulate them and say good job. And that is fucked up. And if you don't think that that is fucked up, then I'm really sorry, and you must live a pretty sad small life to think that it's okay to encourage people to not eat, that it's okay to encourage people to spread hate, that it's okay that the world is not accessible to everybody. Just because you are not impacted by weight stigma does not mean it's something that you don't have to fight against. And weight stigma has so many physical effects. It increases our stress hormone, and I promise you that being stressed is one of the worst things that we can do for our body in general. And so if we actually care about people's health, then why are we making them so stressed to where they can't even go to the doctors in the first place? Why are we making them so afraid to see family members who are supposed to love them? And stress impacts our health in ways that I don't even fully understand, like our blood pressure, our cardiac health, our insulin resistance, as well as our visceral fat levels. So if we truly care about people's health and want to lower their blood pressure and want to help their cardiac health in general, we should not be criticizing them when they come into the doctor's office, because that just makes shit worse. The thing is that people who are discriminated against their weights, whether it is within interpersonal relationships or in a doctor's office, they are 2.5 times more likely to experience mood or anxiety disorders. This is serious. It's not just about people being too soft. This has real consequences that hurt people. Words hold power. And so as we sort of reach the end of this video, I'm sure we have the question of, well, what can we do? Right? What can we do when this is such a systemic issue? And the thing is that we don't have a lot of control, and we have to change things on a small scale for ourselves and hope for a societal shift. It is still a very niche subject. It is not something that people have heard of. If you walk up to somebody on the street and say, hey, have you heard of fatphobia or weight stigma? They probably haven't. Some people have, but most people haven't, especially the older generations. But for the people who do experience weight stigma, it is very, very real and very scary. We need medical care to be more accessible. We need accessibility in general. We also need something like the BMI scale, which is outdated, to be completely removed from all medical practices. People also need to face consequences for their actions. It should be seen as abuse. It should be taken seriously. When doctors do not listen to patients, that should also be taken seriously. Demeaning behavior should not be accepted. We have to call it out more. We need laws against discriminatory acts within healthcare. And we also need more healthcare workers to actually be aware about this topic in the first place. Because again, it is not something that most people know about. And you, the person who is watching this video, whether you are fat or not, you need to be an ally. You need to speak up when people are making fat jokes, when people are being discriminatory against others. You need to speak up when people just comment on other people's bodies in general. And we also have to understand that health is multifactorial. Health is not just about how we move and what we eat or consume. There's so many factors that go into it. And I really hope by the end of this video that you realize that fatphobic comments are probably the most unhealthy thing that we can say to somebody. Being discriminatory because of somebody's weight only affects people's health negatively. I know that this is a big subject, and when I tell you I literally just touched the top of the iceberg, that's all that we did. There's so much more. There are so many stories out there too of people sharing their experience with fatphobia, and I highly recommend that you listen to those voices. Because if you yourself have never lived in a fat body, then there's only so much that we can understand and only so much that we can do. And so by listening to these voices and taking their concerns seriously, you are starting with you and becoming a firm ally. And unfortunately right now, that's all that we can do. This topic is something that always gets me really heated, and I'm sorry if I was a little bit all over the place. I tend to just go with the flow sometimes. But if you have any personal experience with fatphobia that you feel comfortable sharing, feel free to leave it in the comments down below. We're gonna make sure that it remains safe and respectful. But yeah, this is your sign to learn more about weight stigma, call it out, and also to call out medical professionals when you can and if you feel comfortable as well, and to seek out care that is very inclusive, such as health at every size, doctors or therapists or psychotherapists, etc. But I think that that is it for today's video, and I really hope to see you in my next one, okay? Make sure to do something kind for yourself. Bye, friends.